Hey everybody, Nicholas Snow here. Welcome to a very special edition of Notes from Hollywood on the PromoHomo.TV network. I'm your host, Nicholas Snow. This is coming out to you live on July 21st, 2020, and it's a fantastic day to be having my guest on the show today. Doug Spearman is the creator behind the film From Zero to I Love You, and I actually want that poster to be big. Now, I've known Doug for about 20 years. He's an amazing man. He's an actor, he's a writer, he's a producer, he's a director. I've given him the title activist as well. That's not in his biographical material, but he is an activist in my view, and I bet that when I ask him, he'll own that title as well. And I'm very grateful because Doug has given me permission to dive deeply into some really important topics today, such as, for example, recovery in the context of 12 steps, the intersectionality of sexual orientation and race, experience in life and a career in Hollywood, and all sorts of other important issues. This is an organic conversation. None of it's planned in advance, and I'm so happy that you're here. As you can see in the message in the bottom, this is a live broadcast, and if you are watching live and you comment during the show, I have the ability to curate your comments into the broadcast, and will do so because I like this to be interactive. I also want to let you know that because I know Doug is a very popular person online, especially because of the recent on-air reunion of the cast from the historic series Noah's Ark, among other reasons. And there are people that will be tuning into this particular episode who are unfamiliar with the broadcast. So I just wanted you to know that there are 5 shows on the PromoHomo.TV network. You can find them all at the website PromoHomo.TV, and there's information on how to submit guests to all of the shows. My fundamental purpose is connecting the circuitry of humanity, and I'm going to be connecting my circuitry with Doug's humanity right after this. And I think I mentioned that at the top of the show that From Zero to I Love You is out today across all streaming platforms. And I want you to know that. And without further ado, let's bring Doug into the show today. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Hey, Nicholas. Thank you for having me.
It's great that you're here. When we were off camera before the show, we were both basically expressing satisfaction that we're aging well after all this time.
Yeah, it's about 20 years since we've met. Yeah, just about.
Yeah, that's great. I did. Well, we'll get into how we met in a minute, but because this is very timely, I'd love for you to tell us about the film From Zero to I Love You, and I'm going to just bring it right up here for a moment while you talk about it.
So it's a love story. It's a romantic comedy for a modern age. It's set in Philadelphia. It took me 4 years to shoot it. It stars Scott Bailey, who a lot of people will know from either Guiding Light, if you were a soap fan, or a really great movie called Prayers for Bobby. And my Noah's Ark co-star and the lead in the series, Daryl Stevens, and some wonderful other actors, Keely Lefkowitz, Richard Lawson, Gregory Zarian, Stephen Bowman, Leslie Zemeckis. And it's about a man who, played by Scott, whose name is Jack, who's been married for 12 years, has a perfect wife and two wonderful kids, and lives in a suburb on the main line in Philadelphia. And one night, he is no longer able to suppress the fact that he's been attracted to men his entire life. And so he goes out to a bar instead of going right home on the train, and he hooks up with Daryl's character, his name is Peter, and what is supposed to be a one-night stand turns into this epic love story and love affair that changes everybody's lives. It has very widespread connotations and complications. And, you know, the way of true love is never easy. And we shot it in LA, New York, Philadelphia, and Palm Springs.
Well, it's
wait, one more thing. And the DVD is out. Yes, it's out on several streaming platforms, including iTunes and Amazon and Aristocal, who's our distributor.com. But it's also, the DVD goes on sale today, as a matter of fact, on Amazon, which I'm very happy about.
Now, did you know that when we picked today for the interview? I didn't either, so that's serendipity. So we do have a comment from Adrian Christian. He says, "Great work, Doug Spearman. What is your hope for future stories we can tell from LGBTQ people?" But before we get into your answer, I just want to throw in that one of the most significant inspirations for my own coming out was the movie Making Love.
Yeah, it's a lot like Making Love. It's a lot.
And
it's a lot like that.
And your film clearly reminds me of that. And as much progress as we have experienced as a movement, then I think that there's still going to be people in that same situation that haven't come out, that are going through these journeys, and that this will always be a fresh and meaningful story.
Yeah, well, it's the other thing that I left out about the movie is that it's actually based on my experience. There have been a lot of married men in my life, up to a certain point where I was just, from the time I was a teenager all the way through the beginning of my 30s, there were just a lot of and I wanted to write this story to see if I could figure out why. But to answer Adrian's question, which I think is a really great question, I think right now the doors are wide open. I think we are so lucky to have shows like Pose. Like, who would have imagined even 5 years ago a television show about transgender women, especially transgender women of color? We had a really great success with a reunion show for Noah's Ark. That's a show about 5 gay black men. I think the sky's the limit. Do you know what I mean? I think if you can figure out a cogent storyline, and it's something, because our stories, and you can figure out a cogent storyline and a way to tell the story that appeals to the heart as opposed to just the sexuality of the character, then you've got something. Because our stories are universal stories, because we're people. You know what I mean? We're people, so we have to figure out what it is that we want to say about ourselves. My dad gave me one piece of really good advice, and he said, "Write your life," and that's what I try to do all the time. Even Hot Guys with Guns is based on my life in a way. So.
I appreciated the dedication to your parents at the end of Hot Guys with Guns. That was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my dad was great. He took me to the movies every Thursday when I was a kid. And starting, oh my God, I guess I was 4. And my mother loved movies, old movies in particular. And she would keep me home to watch a classic movie from school, or she would keep me up to watch a classic movie. Like, I have these very strong, like the first time I ever had champagne was my mother wanted to stay up and watch The Bride of Frankenstein, and she made cold lobster tails, and we had champagne because my mother liked to make an event out of everything. She kept me home from school to watch The Women on a 2:00 movie. She's like, "You got to watch this movie."
Oh my goodness. I want to thank you in advance because you've given me permission to dive into some sensitive topics. So I just want to say publicly, and I know you know this already, that I have this perspective, but Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
But in the wake of this whole new awareness about what Black people are going through and have gone through, my own awareness in the wake of this. So I just want to confess to you that as someone that's been involved on the front lines of the LGBTQ civil rights movement, I always felt like we were all fighting the same fight. And in a sense, we were. But in so many ways, we weren't. Because you, as a Black man, were fighting all kinds of other struggles that I was immune from.
True. But I was also fighting them within the community.
Sure, exactly. And I think that that's one of the themes that gets addressed. Well, it is one of the themes you do address a bit in your work. But I came up with this kind of metaphor about how to describe the differences of a white person with privilege and a Black person dealing with all sorts of systemic racism involved, let's say, in a pride parade. So I'm walking along and it's a sunny day and it's fantastic. And you're walking next to me, but you have this giant headwind against you. You have an invisible thumb on you, and you have people to try to chain you and pull you back. Would you say that that is an accurate sort of comparison of the forces that those two individuals are facing?
I would definitely agree with the headwind. I would definitely agree with that. I mean, yeah, I think from my own experience, a lot of what there's the experience of a Black man in America. There's the experience of a Black man in academia. There's the experience of a Black man in the workforce. And my experience as a Black man in the gay community and then in Hollywood. And they're all slightly different and the same. Do you know what I mean? Like the flavor gets mixed up, but it's all in the same stew. And yeah, it is. It can be. But, being a pride parade is not quite the same thing as it's not the same as going to a bar. I mean, I think it's because a lot of the things are loosened. But if you and I were going into a bar, say in 1989 or 1991 in Hollywood, in West Hollywood, you could walk right into a bar and I might get stopped and asked for 3 pieces of picture ID.
I heard about that a lot, and I want to
Yeah.
say Catch One was not Catch One. Catch One was very gay friendly. Studio One was
Studio One and Rage.
notorious for
And
really.
Rage. Yeah. But it also depends on how you look. Do you know what I mean? If you had a certain look as a Black man, you be fine. Do you know what I
And
mean?
what was that look?
I think you had to be, a certain level of attraction or attractive to the person, to the gatekeeper. Do you know what I mean? But if you looked like, you maybe weren't wearing the most fashionable update clothes, or, you didn't look like you had a whole lot of money or, I don't know. Like I didn't get stopped very often. I always got stopped for my ID, but I know people who got stopped for 3 pieces of ID and who in the late 80s, early 90s had 3 pieces of photo ID on them on a Saturday night in West Hollywood. I mean, come on.
It's sad. Well, I'm doing everything I can to learn about my own relationship to systemic racism. The reason I asked your permission to talk about these topics is one message I'm getting loud and clear is it's not Black people's responsibility to tell me what to do.
Right.
But one of the things I do want to do is elevate Black voices and to have these conversations in a public way when I have been given permission to do so. So I really appreciate that.
Sure. I mean, and I appreciate the conversation. Yeah, these conversations are exhausting, but I know that it's part of my responsibility to be willing to have them. But I also know that I have to take care of myself long enough to sort of give myself the energy to do this. I mean, this is not the only conversation I've had with a white man about what's going on, and certainly not a white gay man. But I'm willing to have the conversation. And yeah, it's not my job to educate you, but at least I can be part of the solution. I mean, saying no to you doesn't work.
So one of the things that I'm also aware of looking back is how historic Noah's Ark was. If that show went on the air today, it would still be historic.
Yeah.
But for it to have gone, it was 15 years ago, I think. For it to have been on the air 15 years ago on a national cable network was huge.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I still think, I really wonder, because Sumner Redstone, who owned Viacom at the time, was still very active and I met Sumner a few times, and he was an incredibly powerful man. And, I still wonder how it was that he greenlit their first scripted series on the network to be about 5 gay black men. I mean, it still blows my mind that we were even on the air. Do you know what I mean? Because it's still not a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, there has never been another Noah's Ark. Excuse me. And we were on the air for 2 seasons, and we did a movie, and then, clearly there is a call for it in a space. Patrick Ian Polk, the writer, creator of Noah's Ark, just got us together to do a reunion Zoom show and Patrick posted yesterday that 500,000 people have watched that. Well, let's put it this way. It's been watched 500,000 times. So clearly, there's a need for that kind of representation.
Well, not only has the specific reunion been watched that many times, but there are countless responses in other people's programming to the reunion and to the show.
Really?
Yes, all sorts of people are posting their own programming about the Noah's Ark reunion. And
I try not to read a lot about myself online.
Well, and the whole cast was reunited for a panel discussion for, was it Entertainment Weekly?
Mm-hmm.
And that has had a ton of views as well. I have to just give a shout out to Patrick Ian Polk. I haven't had the honor of meeting him. Please, Patrick, if you watch, come on the show. Frankly, if any of your colleagues in entertainment want to be on this show, they're welcome. Right now, I'm very hooked on Pea Valley. I'm wondering, have you been able to watch it yet? Do you have Stars?
No.
All right, so Pea Valley on Stars, amazing. Patrick is very involved with it. But you did reference Pose, and even as a white gay man who looks back at that storytelling that happens a lot in the 80s about what we were collectively experiencing, I'm just moved to tears throughout every episode of the show. And I'm wondering, what is it like for you to see that representation on the screen?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have a hard time watching anything about the late 80s because, as a 20-something-year-old man, it was like living in a shooting gallery. I mean, or being in a battle. Like, I lost so many friends to AIDS.
Yeah.
In my 20s. I did.
Yeah.
So I've seen some episodes, but I can't spend a lot of time in that space. It's just so painful for me to do that, to bring it up, and to live the way that was, and I was living in Washington, D.C. and New York at the time. So it was very present all the time. It's amazing.
I have the same experience. There are things that I know I could learn a lot from if I watch them, and I just haven't, or if I don't. And to be honest, a lot of those stories are about the horrors perpetrated against Black people in America. I do embrace those storylines because I need to, but they're just so horrifying as well, and that's not my experience.
Well, Nicholas, how much do you know about your own ancestry? mean, you know.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So, for example, I did my DNA testing on two different platforms, and I have found I have a third cousin who's a black woman, and I've connected to her. But when you look at the generations that are involved, I think that the likelihood is that I'm a descendant of slave owners.
Do you know, I am. Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
sure.
I'm descended from people who fought on both sides of the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. You know what I
I,
mean? So
I,
I understand that. I mean, we have complicated histories. None of it. It's very. I find that very few of us have a very sort of clean line of demarcation about who we were and where we come from.
I was also told I am not my ancestors, but I was also told as I was growing up that I was a descendant of Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. I haven't been able to prove that in my own DNA research. I also know that actually I'm not the most famous Nicholas Snow. The most famous Nicholas Snow came over on the Mayflower, so he was a colonizer.
Well,
You
here's the
know,
other thing. Do you know? You know, one of my ancestors came over on the Mayflower. I'm descended from William Bradford on my dad's side, and one of the things that I was in Plymouth and I was doing some research, and I discovered that William Bradford was not only the first governor of Massachusetts, but he was the first sort of sheriff of the Plymouth colony. And in the 120 settlers, colonists that came over on the Mayflower, 3 of them were gay because they were constantly being arrested for sodomy and buggery and talking other guys into it. Because William Bradford took extensive notes on the crimes committed in the Mayflower colony in the Massachusetts Bay. And there are 3 guys who got off that boat gay as a Easter bonnet. Which we've always been here. We have always been part of the culture, and gotten in trouble
so
for it.
yeah, well, it is important we learn our history. It is important that we address these issues now in an ongoing fashion, in
Sure.
whatever way we as individuals and we collectively can. I'm wondering when you first got into entertainment, your first job was with Charlie Rose.
Well, Charlie was my internship.
Oh, your
Charlie was
internship.
my first internship was with Charlie Rose when I was in college, and the Charlie Rose show had been on air, and then it went off the air, and then it came back while I was in college, and ABC in Washington put Charlie on the air, and the Charlie Rose show was me and Charlie. But it was amazing because it gave me a huge amount of confidence because Charlie was tough. And Charlie had the most amazing Rolodex I'd ever seen in my life. And so he would, Julian Bond would come on the show, or Peter Jennings would come on the show. George Herbert Walker Bush, who was vice president under Reagan and then became president, was on the show. And Charlie would say to me, okay, the vice president's coming. Need you to go to the green room, get him a cup of coffee, sit there and make conversation until I call and say, bring him down to the studio. So I, as a 20-year-old, was being charged with talking to these incredibly powerful, intelligent, interesting men and women, mostly men. And, and then Charlie would hold me accountable for how he looked on the air. It was great. It gave me a huge amount of confidence.
And in 1991, you moved to LA and worked with advertising executives Ray Jacobs and Stefan Gerber.
Yeah.
Talk about that experience and some of the stars that you worked with.
Well, so my parents, let me just back up and say a couple of things. My parents didn't want me to be an actor, and that's all I'd wanted to do. And I went to Indiana University, and I double majored in theater, performance and direction, and television production and direction, and then ended up with this really a great sort of concentration in advertising. So I came out and I ended up, after graduating, working for BET, and then I worked in advertising in Washington, D.C. for ABC. And Stefan and Ray, who were just giants of the promo world. I mean, they created a lot of campaigns for local and national television shows, and they really took me under their wing, and they gave me an opportunity that literally the first day that I moved to LA. But I want to back up because you want to talk about the intersectionality of race and Hollywood and
sexual orientation. Yes.
Orientation. But my very first paid acting gig was when I was at CBS in Boston, and they needed somebody. They were doing a show on the Civil War because Ken Burns' Civil War series had come out that winter, and I was hired to read the diaries and the letters of General Robert E. Lee. I did the voice of Robert E. Lee, which I always crack up because that was literally my first paycheck. Which would be politically incorrect today. Probably, yeah, probably. But I could do sort of a soft Virginia accent back then. But so I moved to LA.
Did they use references like "you sound white"?
Nobody said that, but that was the reason why I got the job.
Which, by the way, for anyone watching that doesn't know, it's a very racist thing to tell someone they sound white. Just so do some research on that if you don't know what that means.
Which is that's I had to school people in. Even 2 days ago, I had to school somebody in on that, because what they don't understand is that just means I have an education, and that their experience of their understanding of what it means to be black in this country is very narrow, and is not as wide as the experience of actual people in this country.
Well, even highly educated people from all walks of life might use phrases of speech and colloquialisms that are part of their cultural communication, which isn't indicative of someone's ethnicity, but is part of the culture, and it can't be assigned to everyone in the culture. But I think that you can trace figures of speech and sayings to particular ethnic and cultural heritage. Would you agree with that?
I think that's incredibly well said. I wish I'd said that. I'm going to try to remember that, because I mean, it's very true. I mean, I went home for Christmas. I recently moved to New Orleans. I recently moved to the deep, deep South. And I want
to get into the reasons why, because that has to do with your upcoming work. But keep on your current train of thought for now.
But I was raised in the north part of the South. I was raised in Washington, D.C., which is as far next to Baltimore, which is the most southern city in the country. But I went home for Christmas, and I hadn't been home to D.C. to spend time with my family in a long time. And in L.A., and certainly in Hollywood, when you're getting hired, a lot of, I play a lot of lawyers, judges, college professors, doctors, and administrators. And, I've played one thug in my life. And sometimes I don't get the part because I'm not black enough. Do you know what I mean? Because, and I've also lost parts because I wasn't gay enough. And I'll let you figure out what all of those both mean. And sometimes when I lived in LA, there were a lot of times when I just felt like I don't belong here. I don't fit in. And I went home for Christmas, and I realized that my entire family speaks exactly the way I do. Do you know what I mean? Like we have a certain shorthand, and there's certain, because I'm fourth generation college student in my family. But there's 6 generations of people who went to college in my family. Just on in my direct black ancestors. I'm sure my white ancestors may have gone to college too, but in the black family that I knew, we went to college. You went to college. And so it felt more natural. Like I needed just to be around that. That's where I come from.
That makes me want to ask another question. So when we're seeing conversations around privilege today, it's very much tied to race. As a black man, you have had a lot of privileges that aren't afforded to other black people for various reasons. And I'm wondering, does the concept of privilege within the black community, is that a conversation within the black community about why some black people have more privilege than others, and is there efforts to bring more equality in that context as well?
That's a really great question. It's a little broad, and it's broad because it sounds like we all get together and have a conversation. Like when you say within
You don't? You're not at the same potluck?
no, no, and we don't all go to the same family reunion.
No,
You know
I
what I mean?
understand that, right? Yeah.
So it's hard to say what the community. It would be easier for me to say, have I had those conversations? Yeah, we have them all the time, and we usually have them, and they started around skin tone. They really do start around, at least the ones that I've been involved in, where for a long time it was, and in my family there's a real dichotomy because my mother was very light skinned, and my mom's mom could pass and did pass for white when it was necessary, and my dad was brown skinned like me. And I can even remember as a child that my grandmother, my mom's mom, used to refer to my dad as that monkey man. And she always called him by his whole name, and she would sometimes refer to him in front of me as that monkey man. Do you know what I mean? And my dad's mom didn't like my mother because she was light skinned and thought she was, and my dad's mother always assumed that my mother thought she was better because she was light skinned. And my mother never, ever, ever, ever felt that way or expressed it or acted in that way. So I think, and then there was a real reaction, like, in the 70s, the late 60s and 70s, where it was like the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. And it was all about black power. But it's taken a long time. But my parents, I think, were very, because I was raised in Washington, D.C., and like all the great museums. And at the time, the school systems were fantastic. And, I could go to New York on the train when I wanted to. And so we just had I had a middle class life, and they kept doing, when things would open up, I was allowed to go see it so I think it's because my parents had a huge amount of curiosity and wanted me to see things and know things and do things. And even if they themselves wouldn't or couldn't or didn't feel comfortable doing it. You know what I mean?
Sure. I just wanted to clarify when I was asking, are there conversations happening about different access to privilege within the black community? I understand that there isn't going to be one huge conversation and it's not a homogenous group. But in our culture today, very visibly, we are seeing conversations around privilege that are specifically tied to race.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious about the conversations about privilege within particular racial groups. For example, the Reverend Bishop Barber, I don't know if his first name is Bishop. Haley Barber. The Reverend Barber is very involved in advancing the rights of the impoverished. And one of the points he makes is that the poverty is something that is afflicting people of all ethnicities.
Yeah.
And he's fighting. He's fighting for everyone who's addressing poverty.
I don't think, to answer that question. And first of all, I didn't take offense to it.
No, I did, but no, I know you weren't offended by it. I just wanted to be clear.
But I know, like the conversations that stick out to me. It's a conversation we had the day after Christmas in my family at the dining table, and we were talking about the fact that white people seem to be it had occurred to several of us independently before this conversation that there was so much attention and focus and anger from white people against Donald Trump that for a good period of time, a lot of it was not about us, as a black community or black people. And we were in the process of self-healing and taking care of each other. And I've noticed that escalate tenfold in the last 6 weeks about us taking
self-healing.
Yeah, about like going, dude, are you okay? What can I, how are you? Do you know what I mean? It's not about necessarily going out in the streets, but it's really, especially, people older than 30 are like, are you okay? Like, what do you need? Take some time, breathe, because it's a lot. And in terms of privilege, I haven't had any conversations about privilege. I just think, and I haven't really read anything about, any conversations or articles about privilege within the community itself or in the Black experience. I think people are just happy to be making it, but there is a very, very strong ethos and mindset to help other people. Like, if like each one help one, and if you when you get up, you reach back and you help somebody else up. That's the way. I mean, nobody's ever said, hey, like, you got more than I did, so you need to give me some. No, the whole thing is like, I get to where I am and then I reach back and I hire somebody or I give somebody an opportunity. And I'm like, I'm part of the latter. I'm not part of the problem.
Sure.
You have to be an active part of the solution. That's
One of
where it's brought up.
Well, and one of the key points to make is even within the Black community, when there are people that have achieved a lot of success, it doesn't protect them from the systemic racism and being pulled over for driving while Black and all of these other things. So,
It happened to me. I mean, I was the first time I ever drove a car in New York City. I wasn't behind the wheel 15 minutes, and I only got behind the wheel because I said I've never actually driven. The whole time I've lived in New York, the whole time I visited New York, I'd never ever actually driven a car, and I got behind the wheel. And this was about 3 months after a man was shot coming out of his bachelor party in Queens I think it was Queens. Was shot 60 times by police officers while leaving his bachelor party. And if my friend Ron, whose SUV it was, hadn't leaned over and with his white face smiled at the officers and said, "Is there a problem?" I'm not sure I would have made it out of there, quite frankly.
Well, I'm not surprised by your story, based upon everything that I have learned. It's terrible. That's what I have to say about that.
It is. It's awful. It's awful. But there's a certain amount of, like, when it's awful every day, it's it's kind of like living somewhere.
Yeah.
The weather's shitty, but you gotta get up. You gotta go to work. Shitty weather or no shitty weather.
I don't want to forget to talk about what brought you to New Orleans, because that has to do with your next big project.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Well, so I wrote a script. I wrote a thriller and I set it in.
What's it called?
It's called Delilah Underwood, and
Okay.
which is a woman's name. It's the lead character's name, and it takes place here in New Orleans. I'm not going to give too much of it away. And I came down last summer to take some meetings, and it's going to be my first big budget film, and I'm excited about that. And I wanted to make sure that the script actually worked in New Orleans. And I was actually staying in this apartment, which was my friend Roy's apartment and is now my apartment, empty because all my stuff is still in LA. And I was riding Roy's bike around New Orleans, trying to learn New Orleans, and I was going to meetings, and I was sweaty because it's humid as hell here. And I just kept looking around going, I love this city. It's so beautiful. I love the city. It's so flat. You could bike everywhere in half an hour. And there was just, and also I missed being around a lot of Black people because New Orleans is 60% Black. And I missed the South. And I just realized that the film and television industry is huge here. And, and I could work and I could do what I wanted. And I realized that there was no reason for me to not live someplace where I was happy and felt at home and could flourish. And I have loved New Orleans since the first trip I made to the city back in the 80s when I worked for BET. So I just thought, why not? Why not at this stage of my life? Why not go someplace and be happy and then work it out from there?
Well, congratulations. And I'm taking from your statement that this is your first big budget opportunity that you have financing?
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, I'm working on it. Meetings are happening. Those meetings are happening, and but it's You know, it's a very steep learning curve. But I've been lucky enough to surround myself with people who can punch at that weight. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have to say, I'm blessed. I have a 65-inch flat screen TV with surround sound, and I'm close enough to this TV on this reclining sofa that it really is like being in a 7-star movie theater. And I watched Hot Guys with Guns last night, and it just the beginning of the film. It took me back to Outfest. I just felt like, all right, I'm at a screening at Outfest. You're in the audience. All of the filmmakers are in the audience, and there's the excitement when the film hits the screen and all these names start popping up. And because I know people in the business, I was, paying attention to all the names. And I have to say that the opening animations for Hot Guys Hot Guys with Guns, very James Bond-esque, which I know was not a mistake.
Right.
I bet you that when the credit for the person that designed that came on the screen, that there was a huge applause
Yeah.
while it was happening, because it just captivates you and takes you into the story. I was so impressed with that.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem with, not the problem, but the realities of making a LGBT plus independent film is that you tend to have to make them on small budgets. Especially if you're not making them with movie stars, and very rarely do you get to make them with actual, A-list movie stars. So you have to figure out ways to be creative. And I wanted to make something, even though I was working in a really low budget, I wanted to make something that looked like it had a big budget. I wanted to find something. So, I just used as many relationships as I possibly could, from my work as a television writer, producer, promo and advertising writer, producer, to draw some of those people into my film projects. And
Well, that film did not look low budget. I have to say, Hot Guys with Guns did not look low budget.
well, you'd be, yeah, because I borrowed every nice house I could get my hands on. I had a fantastic team. I really want to shout out to Kelton Jones, who was the cinematographer, who the guy that shot that, who also shot a lot of Noah's Ark in our first season, and he shot the hell out of that movie, and it looks really good. And a lot of times, because if you're shooting at if you're shooting low budget, a lot of people don't make the mistake of not really lighting. They don't spend the time to light the way that they should. And Kelly really, really lit the hell out of that movie. And then I had a fantastic editor who I'd known for almost 40 years. His name is Christo Cyrus, and he edited both of my films. And when you have good people, you get good work.
Well, congratulations on everything that you've been doing and where it's brought you so far. I wanted to know, you have been in significant long-term relationships with white guys, and I'm wondering, have you ever gotten flack from other black men for being in a relationship with a white guy? Is there the same sort of backlash that I have heard that black men experience when heterosexual men experience when they're in a relationship with someone other than a black woman? I know that ultimately love is love, and that none of this makes a difference, and we should all be free to love who we want. But I'm curious, has that ever been something you've received backlash for?
No, no, no. I mean, no, but well, two things. One, no one's ever come to my face and said something like that, but I do know that if I'm dating a white guy, that it's a political statement when we hold hands. And I have been places like my ex, my last relationship was with a guy named John, and we were in Boston, and John, who was raised in Ireland, doesn't have the same North American history of racism and discrimination that, like dating an American white man would have. So John just was happy to hold my hand everywhere. And we were in Boston on our first away trip, and I remember, oh my God, I remember walking down the street and John holding my hand And I remember the look in the faces of black women that I would see, and I was just like, well, okay, I just gotta teach them. I just gotta be here, and I just gotta make it okay. But I would see it on certain people's faces, and I would just go, you know what? It's a political statement, and I know it, and I'm just gonna be here, and I'm not gonna run from it. But it also, when the question makes certain assumptions, it says, a lot of times people assume that I only date white men, and that's not true. Not that you did that, but I'm saying that a lot of people make the assumption because, a lot of times you'll see me photographed with a white man. They assume that I will only date a white man, and that is entirely untrue. In fact, the last guy I met with in New Orleans is black.
So I was very involved in a group in the 90s in LA called Black and White Men Together. I have one person I would consider my ex. He's black, and we have a great relationship today. And one of there was a time when I was just really only interested in dating black men.
Why?
And I don't really know why. But in my own personal growth, I found black men to be the most attractive. And this is for whatever reason, and still today, what's true for me is I find non-white people to be most attractive to me, not a specific ethnicity. Or if it's another person that falls into the Caucasian category, I like the tall, dark, and handsome. That's just what happens for me. But one of the things I look at seriously is what are the distinctions between what might attract someone to someone on a purely surface level versus connecting with their humanity, and what is and is not objectification, and what is and is not related to perhaps racial bias or stereotypes.
That's
and I'm here. I know it's a lot, but it's my responsibility to take on those questions for myself. And it's one of the things that would be talked a lot about in the rap sessions of Black and White Men Together. And I guess there's so many things we could talk about in everything I just said, but one of the things I would like to ask you in your own experience is, when do you feel that you are being objectified based upon racist, subconscious or conscious views of the person that's interested in you versus someone that is interested in engaging with your complete humanity?
When I'm dating a European versus dating an American.
Oh, so you think inherent in dating American that they're going to be viewing you through their own racist experiences?
A lot of times, yeah. It's and wow, I just broke out in a sweat answering that question. Yeah, because I just kind of went out there because you can't be an American, white or black, and not have an opinion about the skin color of the other person. I personally don't think it's possible. And we're seeing that play out right now. But if you're not raised in a culture where that is an apparent thing all the time, you don't think to filter it. You just see the person.
So is it somehow bad of me to be more attracted to Idris Elba than Brad Pitt? Is there something that I need to inherently? You can't answer that.
Because I believe attraction is your animal brain. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I remember the first man I ever thought was attractive. The first time I saw somebody on TV, and I thought, oh my God, this guy, like, I didn't understand what was happening to me. And it was Mickey Dolenz it was Mike Nesbitt of the Monkees when I was a 4-year-old. I mean, I was 4, and I knew that I was just like, I was in love with him. And I don't know why that was. And hell, Idris Elba's gorgeous. I don't know if I would like. There have been certain men that I've met in my life that I've been fortunate enough to meet as an actor, where I didn't know how to act. Like, I mean, I didn't, you know, I kind of like, I lost it a little bit. And Brad Pitt was one of them. And I'd met Brad Pitt, but, you know, back when I met Brad at a party back in the 90s, and we got hammered together. And that wasn't very appropriate.
And now you're both sober, so congratulations.
I can't speak for him, but I know
I think he's been out about it, actually.
Well,
from what I hear, he's sober.
But the point is, you know, like I was having breakfast with a friend of mine at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Channing Tatum walked into the restaurant, and I was like, I gotta leave. I can't be around this guy because he's like that guy you went to high school with. That was popular. And I was crazy, but I think no matter who it is, it touches something in your animal brain that, you know, that I don't think you can figure it out. Do you know what I mean? Like, you are attracted to who or what you're attracted to. There are people who are attracted to I know that there are things that turn me off, and I don't know why they turn me off. But I know that, like, hell, if Idris Elba came at me, I'd be like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, that would be awesome.
Idris, if you're listening, so we're wrapping up the. You know, I just knew that you and I would have no problems filling an hour. I said at the top of the show we could go however long we go, but you and I met in our recovery journeys, and you gave me permission to talk about that. And we interestingly both have just over a little bit over 19 years. You're a month ahead of me. And I have a whole other show on the network called Higher Powered, which takes recovery out of the closet. And in sort of a short version of that, without naming a specific 12-step program, I was just wondering if you would talk about what recovery has meant in your life.
Solution. I mean, it's a lot about solution. I mean, you know, I was one of those kids that felt like, even looking around the playground, I felt like everybody else knew how to do everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, everybody else knew just how to have fun and relax and laugh and play. And I always felt like, I mean, I seriously had this idea that there was this book that everybody else had read about how to be a human being. And, you know, for me, one of the reasons I think I consider myself a really good actor is that I just did whatever the other kids were doing. And it looked like I was like normal, but I don't know if I was. And when I got into a program and I started working the 12 steps, I actually got the book, you know, and I got a way of living that keeps me from self-destructing. You know what I mean? Because I think there are people who can drink with impunity, and I think there are people like me who are allergic to alcohol and cannot. You know what I mean? Like, I know that it's just not a way of life that I can sustain. I can look like I can. I mean, I wasn't necessarily a low bottom drunk, but it's how I don't feel the lows on the inside, because I have found a program for living that helps me live like a normal human being.
Yes. I qualify for programs around food, money, sex, relationships, beverages. I don't have drugs in my story, knock on wood. But what I've gotten out of recovery, in a nutshell, is authentic, sustainable self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
That's my big win.
That's a fantastic one.
Thank you. Is there anything you would like to address that we haven't spoken about in our interview today?
No, I think we had a really good talk. I'm just curious, is there anything from anybody floating down below?
No, I actually put the only comment on the screen that came in live. I can tell we do have live viewers. They're just been quiet today.
Yeah, but it's been great, and I appreciate the time. And again, go get the movie. Go get From Zero to I Love You off of Amazon Prime or Aristocal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
You
not
know?
taking you. I'm not taking you off camera just yet. I did
Okay.
want to give another shout out about that. So from Zero to I Love You, the DVD comes out today, July 21st, 2020. But it's already available as well for digital streaming on all platforms. Now, I want you to tell me, in all honesty, have you ever had an interview like this that covered all of these different topics?
No, because we're in a new world, Nicholas. We are in a new
Yes.
world. We are having conversations that, this is it's not just like a press junket where you go and you talk about stuff. You can't we as gay men and women or queer identified or however you choose to identify, we are living in unique times and we're having conversations about things that people have swept under the rug for years and years and years and just pretended that they weren't happening or made okay for themselves or even stood up and talked about, but not on the level that we have now. And I'm just a person like everybody else, just trying to make it in the world right now and trying to understand what's going on and keep hope, which I really actually have, that things are going to change and that things can get better for everybody. But it takes everybody to do something. This kind of self-examining and then being willing to talk about it. But I mean, we all have to look at our own stuff. I mean, I'm just like you were looking at yours. I'm looking at mine. I'm looking at my
I look at
relationship.
mine on camera. I feel really honored, Doug, that you were willing to, have such a deeply personal conversation with me in a very public fashion. And I think it's very powerful when we express the truth of our lives to the people whom we influence. And I'm honored to know you and call you friend and to be on
Thank
this
you.
road of happy destiny.
Thank you.
And I'm going to let you have a final remark.
I just want to wish everybody the opportunity to be who they are authentically, happily, joyous, happy, and freely. And keep going.
Joyous,
Tell your story.
happy.
Tell your story.
Also, give yourself permission to live your story. So
Mhm.
many people haven't even gotten to the point where they're doing that. So, if you stick around, Doug, I can speak to you briefly after the show. Thank you again for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nicholas.
You're welcome. And I want to thank all of you for watching. As I mentioned at the top of the show, there are 5 programs on PromoHomo.TV. There's information about all the shows and how to submit guests at the website PromoHomo.TV. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. And until next time, I'm Nicholas Snow.